Hello, my name is Luke Shoemaker, and I'm talking about training quality secondary teachers. This is my final paper project, and it's a comparative study of Mexico and Cuba. The research question that guided this study was, what does the research literature say about the effectiveness of teacher training programs in preparing secondary school teachers to equip students with skills for work in Mexico and Cuba? The topics that I looked at were teacher professionalization through recent reforms in the two countries. I also looked at national trends in the implementation of skills for work in both the teaching philosophies of teachers and also the pedagogical approaches, for example, maybe through accounts going on in classrooms. I also focused on challenges facing current teachers. The specific questions that I addressed were, how do the attributes and rationale of teacher preparation programs compare in Mexico and Cuba? And this also goes hand in hand with, what are the national expectations and views of teachers, and also what are the national objectives for students. Okay. Question 2 that I addressed was, what are the impacts of student academic success and also their retention in school from recent changes in teacher preparation and the professional development initiatives in the two countries. Okay. The comparative framework that I utilized from Brian Thomas with their 3 dimensions appears here. So I was focusing again at the national level. So this study, it doesn't capture all the complexities going on and the exceptions at the local level. I did focus on the entire population, specifically current and prospective secondary teachers. And I was looking at teaching methods and how those teaching methods impart relevant skills and skills for work for students. And moving on to the Sustainable Development Goals, and Target 4.4 deals with substantially increasing the number of youth and adults who have relevant skills for employment, decent jobs, and entrepreneurship. And this becomes very broad because the workplace values many skills. But UNESCO does point out there's a difference between cognitive and non-cognitive skills, and even that line can be a hard distinction to make because of the different values that workplace has for different skills. I tended to focus on non-cognitive skills. So for example, asking myself, what are teachers doing to shape experiences that allow students to grow in perseverance, self-control, and social skills. Also, it's worth pointing out that a lot of these skills also are shaped by the culture of the school itself and of the communities, and also of maybe even national culture. So for example, in Western nations typically are known to emphasize confident speaking as a social skill, whereas other cultures may emphasize listening over speaking. One of the main challenges to reaching this target, this SDG 4 target, is the high school completion rate in both countries. Mexico in particular had one of the lowest high school completion rates, and OECD gives 2 reasons why the dropout rate is so high in Mexico. And one is that students in Mexico just don't see the value in education, and a lot of the skills that they're learning appear to be irrelevant. And they also have a clear alternative to go into the informal economy if they don't complete high school. Cuba has a higher completion rate. At 50% of the population aged 25 plus has completed upper secondary education. And a lot of research points to this idea of social capital that helps Cuba with this. And this goes into patriotism and the national emphasis given to education and the national importance given to education. Another idea that was raised in the literature is affectivity. So, should teachers extend their role beyond academics and cater to social and emotional needs of students? And perhaps that would help build the social capital in Mexico, was an issue that came up. Mexico has launched national initiatives to combat this high dropout rate, including Construyete and Movimiento contra el Abandono de Escolar. Also, just a note on the economic context. So Mexico Although it has a very large economy, the 11th largest economy in the world, it was characterized by the lowest labor productivity of any OECD nation in 2015. It's also experienced a prolonged growth slowdown over the past 3 decades. So the big push is if Mexico is to realize its place in the and remain competitive in the international market, then it needs to have students with relevant skills such as being able to innovate and being able to think of their identity in uh, outside of their own context. Okay, and then Cuba, similar in that the informal economy is very large, with the service sector employing 65.1% of the active population. And although there's no data on the poverty numbers of poverty in Cuba, the living standards do remain very low for Cubans. Okay, moving on to SDG target 4.C, which is by 2030 substantially increasing the supply of qualified teachers. Mexico has launched 2 recent initiatives, including the National System of Upper Secondary Education introduced in 2009 and the Professional Teaching Service Law of 2013, both of these which work to establish a coherent framework of the profession through various ways, including academic guidance. Cuba has seen a 30% salary increase for its teachers in 1999. However, this was insignificant in competition with tourist occupation, so it remains difficult to recruit professionals into the teaching field. Also in Cuba, one strategy that is unique out of Western nations is that the preparation programs involve only 1 intensive year at university. The remaining years in the programs are made up of on-the-ground experience with experienced teachers and getting classroom experience. Okay. So future direction to address this in this study would be to examine how Mexican and Cuban secondary teachers understand and implement competency-based approaches. Okay, so specifically in Mexico's secondary schools, students are expected to develop 3 kinds of competencies, including generic, such as communication, disciplinary, and professional. And what this requires is the planning of educational activities, which involve solving and addressing real problems and challenges in the student's current context. Okay, so getting away from the rote, like textbook-based learning. And Juliana even mentions, she writes that a single textbook is unlikely to be designed, which can address the multiple and complex realities of Mexico. So, it's widely known that student-centered pedagogy is best for students, and this hones in on that even more specifically and focuses on competency-based approaches. The questions that this direction would address are: how do teachers account the utilization of their preparation and crafting relevant competency-focused experiences? And also, what are the material and methodological constraints teachers identify as obstacles to pedagogical change in both countries? And then what data from this could come from is a study between schools that would involve examining the teachers' approaches, examining their pedagogy, and also getting their own accounts from how their preparation plays into their decisions that they're making. And finally, these are the